This video is a supplement to the residential garage door installation video. It covers installation of torsion springs. Use this video only if you are installing a torsion spring with your garage door. Note, working with any springs can be dangerous. Make sure you follow all safety warnings in the manual and on this video, and read the safety information completely before proceeding with the installation of torsion springs. Do not attempt to install them yourself unless you have the right tools, reasonable mechanical aptitude, or experience. Carefully follow these instructions to avoid personal injury or property damage. If you are missing any spring hardware, call the toll-free consumer services number found on the front cover of the manual. Note, if you do not already have an anchor pad to attach the springs to in your garage, you will have to purchase and install the material needed before continuing the installation. See your manual or supplemental manual for installation instructions. Take a moment to lay out the tools and materials that you will need. The spring hardware consists of a torsion spring or springs, one for a single door, one or two for a double door. Each torsion spring is pre-assembled and consists of spring coils, a stationary cone, and a winding cone. The spring coils are color-coded depending on the spring size and are marked left and right. The winding cones are also color-coded, either red or black. The color on the winding cone is to help identify which side of the door the spring is to be used. The red winding cone torsion springs are used on the left side of the door, while the black winding cone torsion springs are used on the right side of the door when viewing the door from the inside looking out. Failure to install the torsion springs on the correct side will cause your door to function improperly and could result in serious injury. Before we begin, remember, if you have low headroom, these instructions do not apply. Consult the supplemental low headroom manual for installation instructions. To start, lock the door in the down position securely using the door lock, locking pliers, or C-clamps so that it won't prematurely open when tightening the springs. Next, we will assemble the spring components on the spring tube. Start by slipping the torsion springs onto the spring tube, making sure that the red winding cone is on the left end. The nylon center bearing plate, and the black winding cone torsion spring on the right end. The cable drums go on next. The red drum on the left and the black drum on the right. Check that the set screws on the drums face the springs. Next, fasten the bottom end of the bearing plate to the horizontal angle with two 3/8 inch by 3/4 inch long hex head bolts and hex nuts. You can tell the bottom of the end bearing plate by these two parallel rows of 2 slots. Please make sure to use the bottom 2 slots for 12-inch radius horizontal track, and the upper 2 slots for 15-inch radius horizontal track. Fasten the wall flange on the end bearing plate to the wood jamb by first drilling a 3/16 inch pilot hole and attach with one 5/16 inch by 1 5/8 inch lag screw. On 12-inch radius horizontal track, each end bearing plate should also be attached with 3/8 inch by 3/4 inch carriage bolts and 3/8 inch nuts. Insert the center bearing plate between the cones and attach using 3/8 inch hex head bolts and nuts. Then, with the help of your assistant, lift the complete torsion spring tube assembly and slide the ends of the tube into the bearing on the end bearing plates. Drill two 3/16 pilot holes for the red-headed lag screws for the center plate. These pilot holes must be no closer than 1 1/2 inch from the sides and ends of the wood anchor pad. With the tube level, mount the center bearing plate to the center anchor pad using two 5/16 inch by 1 5/8 inch long red-coated lag screws. Note that the red-coated fasteners must be installed for the attachment of the center bearing plate. The red-coated fasteners indicate that this part will be under extreme tension once the spring is wound. The center bearing plate resists the considerable counter torque of the springs. This is why the wood anchor pad must be installed to the frame of the garage as instructed. Next, center the spring in the center bearing plate and tighten the bolts. Thread the cable that is attached to each bottom bracket up between the wall and roller shafts to the cable drum like this. Place the cable in the notch on the cable drum. To remove the slack in the cable, turn the cable drum and slide it up tight against the end-bearing plate. Make sure the cable follows the grooves in the cable drum. Next, hold the cable taut and tighten the set screws on the cable drum with a 3/8" box wrench. Set screws should be turned from 3/4 to 1 full turn after they have made contact with the tube. Use locking pliers clamped to the torsion spring tube to maintain tension on the cable. Repeat this procedure for the opposite side. Check for a straight line drawn across the length of each spring. If no line is present, draw one using a piece of chalk or a marker. This will be used to indicate the number of turns on the springs when we tension the springs. Next, we will insert the 2 winding bars all the way into the winding cone. Make sure you use solid metal winding bars designed for this task. Never use screwdrivers or other substitutes for winding bars. When winding the springs, make sure you stand to the side of the bar so that you're not in the path of the bar if it were to release or fly out. Make sure you insert the bar all the way in the hole and wind the springs 1/4 turn at a time in an upward direction. Note that the tail of the torsion spring coil points in the direction that the spring is wound. Refer to your manual to determine how many turns to apply for your door. If the torsion springs do not increase in tension as the quarter turns are added to the springs, then you probably have the torsion springs reversed. Start winding the right side to the specified number of winds found in the spring winding table of your assembly manual. When you start to wind, the line drawn earlier on the spring starts to wrap around, creating a striping effect. Each stripe represents 1 full turn of the spring. Simply count the stripes to determine the number of winds. Once you have reached the suggested number of winds, secure each spring with the set screws on the winding cone. Set screws should be turned from 3/4 to 1 full turn after they have made contact with the tube. For doors with 2 torsion springs, each torsion spring should be wound the same number of turns. We can now unlock the door or remove the locking pliers and C-clamp if used. Slowly raise the door about halfway and prop it open. Since this is the first time the new door is being opened, proceed slowly and carefully. If the tracks are not correctly aligned or the back hangers are not strong enough, the door may fall. Now we need to double check that the horizontal tracks are parallel with each side of the door, and make sure all the lag screws are securely fastened. Also, with the door open halfway, make sure the rollers do not come out of the top brackets more than about 1/2 inch. If you need to make adjustments to the rear track hanger, remove the weight of the door from the rear hangers by closing and locking the door. To further adjust torsion spring tension, make sure the door is in the down position and locked with locking pliers clamped on the torsion tube. Never adjust the center bearing plate or red-coated fasteners after the springs are wound. If you need to release the tension on a spring, be prepared to handle a strong force as you reduce the tension using winding bars only, and stand to the side. Congratulations! This completes the torsion spring installation procedures.